Welcome back to the Contrarian, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I certainly am. It's been kind of a snowy day for me, actually, which is good in a lot of ways, one of which is that it gives me plenty of time to be inside and do a lot of research. And if anything, I would say that after all of the looking into the gold and silver market I've done today, and today is Saturday, February 8th, 2025 for reference, I'm only further, I would say, convinced that we're still in the very early innings of a precious metals bull market. I'm not a gold bull, I haven't been in the gold and silver space comparatively as long as many other people. A lot of the gold bugs out there, the Peter Schiffs of the world and others who've kind of always been saying that gold would, go to the moon, or it would eventually do that. And I would say it was really back in late 2021, early 2022 when I started looking into gold and silver and the associated mining stocks. And for the next 2 years, they really did underperform. In 2022, not much really performed that great, so gold and silver weren't really an exception there. But, in 2023 and especially in 2024, gold and silver really started to take off. And if anything, I would say that just looking at where those markets are right now, they do have a ways to run, in my opinion. All that being said, of course, nothing in this video is advice for you specifically, but just hopefully some helpful things to think about. And, fundamentally in this video, I'll kind of lay out why I do expect 2025 just to be a continuation of what we saw last year for the metals and the miners. And I do actually think this year the miners could see some return of enthusiasm, which they really have not had, broadly speaking. I mean, some of them have. Some of my mining stocks are up a good 100 or 200% from where I bought into them, which, is good to see. But some of the other miners I've bought are probably flat, and gold in that time frame has gone up 40%. And so a lot of the miners have really underperformed the underlying commodity price, whether it's gold or silver. And I do expect kind of the return of overall interest to really spill over into the mining stocks as well. I think it'll take some solid earnings coming in from some of the big mining names out there, Newmont, Barrick Gold, Goldfields, others that are really going to be kind of bellwether stocks for the entire industry. But once that happens, I think you could see a return of interest to this very overlooked sector. I'll point out just the technicals of gold and silver. Of course, going into the end of October in 2024, they kind of had a blow-off, slightly overbought kind of condition, especially silver. Silver bumped into the $35 an ounce barrier and faced a lot of selling pressure at that level. Gold bumped into approximately $2,800 an ounce. And for the next 3 months, both of the metals consolidated. Silver got down to just under $29 an ounce. Gold got down to around the $2,600, maybe a little lower, I think. And so that did actually reset sentiment quite a bit. In just the last 3 months, investors kind of started to look elsewhere. Maybe they started to think that, this blow-off, move to the upside was kind of over, and that, that it was kind of not going to continue. If anything, I'm seeing a lot of indications that, if anything, that's kind of just getting started with the overall move in gold and silver. But I think that the last 3 months have really reset sentiment in terms of any sort of, irrational exuberance that may have been in place kind of in late October. The fundamentals remain very strong behind gold and silver. Fundamentally, we're at a point where central banks are, broadly speaking, going to be lowering interest rates. I believe investors are going to expect interest rates, broadly speaking, to fall. They're going to expect upcoming disinflation, so not necessarily deflation, but just lower levels of inflation, and that is very bullish for precious metals. I will point out that back in 2021 and 2022, when inflation was spiking, when inflation was going much higher, gold and silver were actually very much so underperforming in that kind of an environment. And so, kind of contrary to what a lot of the gold bugs tend to point out, is that in that kind of an environment where gold and silver, or where interest rates are spiking, gold and silver actually tend not to perform, in that kind of environment, because fundamentally your bonds are then competing, for gold and silver. It makes a lot more sense, if you're kind of looking for a safe haven asset, to go after something that's yielding a lot more than, a metal that isn't really going to have a yield on it. Now, of course, that could all go out the window in a kind of hyperinflationary kind of environment, and we do see that in other economies around the world. I think the US is kind of the exception to that, in that, at least so far, we haven't had out of control hyperinflation where the currency itself is just being debased so quickly that people lose trust in the underlying currency. In Argentina, all these other stories where you have very out of control inflation for a long time, gold and silver do perform very well in that kind of an environment, just when people are looking to get out of the paper money system entirely. But when they're not kind of at that point yet, it seems like gold and silver maybe aren't the kind of inflation hedge that they're often purported to be. Now, heading into a disinflationary kind of period is very bullish for the metals, but also the miners, because in a lot of cases, these miners have had, just negative impacts to their business, in the fact of, labor and energy costs, and just the overall operational costs of the mines going up as well. And so in that kind of an environment, even if gold and silver go up, they're able to sell the metals for more. Also the input costs are going up as well. So, going into a disinflationary kind of period is very bullish for the miners as well. Also, of course, I can't ignore talking about the COMEX drain that continues to occur at an ever accelerating rate. Of course, it's kind of being, I would say, pinned on the concern of tariffs, and just kind of the concern that with the new Trump administration, a lot of kind of hardline decisions are going to occur around the world that maybe weren't as, pressing of an issue before. And so, that is just causing a lot of physical metal to leave, a lot of these bullion banks, and essentially be repatriated by the bank that has ownership of them. And in the coming weeks and coming months, I think we'll really get to find out, if there is actually the physical metal in these banks that they say there is, because, it's highly possible that in a lot of cases, it's possible that there's perhaps not actually a one-for-one backing in terms of the physical metal that is supposedly owned by another entity that is, being stored in a separate bank. And, way back in 2014, 11 years ago, the German Bundesbank suddenly decided to repatriate their gold from Paris and from New York, bringing it back to Germany, back to Frankfurt. And, that kind of started a cascade of other banks to do the same. Netherlands and India and others, repatriated their gold from essentially just kind of safe, westernized countries seen as a safe place to store their gold. They decided it made sense to physically move the metal back to their own country so that they would physically have ownership of it. And if anything, I think that is what is predominantly driving just this spike that we're seeing, especially in the London COMEX, just seeing how much gold is flowing through there, physical gold going back to the owners. That'll be really interesting to see if there is actually all the gold there that they say there is. Now, of course, the physical metal continues to have a high premium over just the, paper price of silver and gold. And also the Shanghai Metals Exchange continues to have a premium over both the London and the New York metals markets. And so that indicates that precious metals are still flowing from Western countries to Eastern countries. But kind of seeing this spike that has occurred recently, kind of after the election, it does make me wonder if some Western countries are starting to wake up as well, maybe see the fact that they need to repatriate their gold and have it, physically be in their own country so that they can actually have it if the relationship with this other country kind of falls apart. So, we're still going to see what happens with this whole commodities exchange, spike that we're seeing of just physical delivery basically going through the roof. And, maybe it's just kind of the beginning of that trend. I don't know, if it continues for a while, but that'll be really interesting to see how kind of the new, administration in the United States may or may not be causing that. And so, bottom line, I remain very optimistic on gold and silver in 2025. I think if anything, a lot of the kind of uncertainty that people are seeing around the world and just kind of the pace at which major things are happening now, both in the United States and around the world, and with relationships between the United States government and other governments, I think gold will play an important role in terms of suddenly investors realizing that, oh yeah, this is a safe haven asset, maybe we want to include, a portion of our portfolios in it. If anything, most Western investors seem to be completely, non-exposed to the precious metals markets. And so even if just, I don't know, 5 or 10% of the average portfolio gets allocated to gold and silver and the miners, perhaps, that would be a major inflow going into a fairly small sector. Crypto, I don't know how that performs this year. If all the other high-flying tech stocks continue to do well, I would expect crypto would probably continue to do well too. But it's definitely not a safe haven asset. It's very much so correlated with a lot of, overvalued or, generously valued stocks out there, and it's kind of more a measurement of just overall froth in the system, I would say. But does remain to be a very interesting sector nonetheless. Of course, I think, the new administration might be a little more friendly to it, or at least that's what they've said so far. But we will, really need to wait and see what they end up doing with crypto, whether they incorporate that, in some way. I would love to know what all of you think about gold and silver. Do you agree with me? Is 2025 going to be a golden year, a silver year? Let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. I hope to see all of you again.